My boss loves to call me at 6:15 a.m. to ask me if I would like to fill the shifts of the people who just called in sick. This is an everyday thing. I was bored and frustrated, so I decided to volunteer at 3:30 a.m. to call this same manager to ask if they needed extra help. He got super pissed and tried to write me up for it. I showed the GM the timestamps of the calls I had received. I don't get calls anymore. Now to the comments. I had something similar but not the same. Instead, when people called off, they wouldn't even bother calling me. Instead, they'd take a pen and write it on the schedule. The schedule I had taken a pic of 5 days before wouldn't be such a problem, but it was always the very next day, and I was either not working that day or had already left work, so I couldn't even double check. I snapped at the manager who was doing that to me. He called me, like he always did, and asked why I wasn't at work. I've had so many calls like this. I just screamed at him, told him he needs to call me and tell me if I could cover instead of expect me to somehow read his mind. I brought the up with the other managers and they finally fixed the problem. By then though, I was just done. I quit shortly afterwards. I've worked in a similar place. They called to ask why I wasn't at work multiple times, but the two most satisfying answers I've ever given were I'm on vacation in Berlin and I quit 3 weeks ago. It was a good workplace, but the managers just did not get scheduling. I've answered with halfway up a ski lift before. That was a fun one. I just tell my co-workers I'm high as duck and if they need me then I'm coming in baked. I've only had one shift where I was just told to stand there and make sure people don't steal anything lol. Doesn't matter what time of day it is, if someone tries to call me into work on a day off and I don't wanna work I say oh I would but I've had a few drinks. I quit my last job because of those calls. They started out as texts first and then I would get a flurry of texts. My boss told the girl that would call out sick all the time, every Sunday/Saturday, morning to just call me in the morning. Oh hell no. The worst part of it was that we had a policy that you couldn't call out sick more than a few times here or there. I used to cover the bartending shifts for my useless co-worker who would frequently call off Tuesday nights because she made good money on Monday nights. I was the AM person on Tuesday. One Tuesday I was waiting for her to show up, so I could leave because I had to get a haircut and pack to leave on a 6 AM flight the next day for my brother's wedding. After an hour, I asked the AGM, "Where's useless?" "Oh, she's not showing. We assumed you would cover." Nope. Not my job. I dressed down the AGM about how it wasn't my responsibility to cover for coworkers who couldn't meet the most basic function of a job that even the 16-year-old busser seems to have mastered, show up. I cashed out and left. They never asked me to cover for her again. Edit, for all of those asking me how you can be so lazy and employed, I worked at a high-end hotel. It was a corporate structure and they had a very lenient call-off policy. Also, being that it was a corporate environment, management's performance, and bonuses, was tied to certain metrics, one of them being guest satisfaction in surveys. My co-worker was very good at getting guests to fill those out favorably, so as long as she kept getting good guest feedback, they didn't care what else she did. I will say that she had very good customer service skills, but what probably tipped things in her favor is that she gave away lots of free booze. It was to the point that her regulars would come in when I covered her shifts, ask for her and leave when I told them that she was off. I told management that she was giving away the bar, because she did it using my username one night, and they still didn't care. I used to work with someone who would call out at least once a week, if not more. She always had some sort of crisis going on, and her crises always happened right when she was scheduled to work. It was pretty impressive, considering us low-level employees were only scheduled for 2 to 3 4-hour shift per week, and our schedules were never the same week to week. Yet somehow her crises always fell on days she had to work. It got to the point where I would check the schedule for the week, and if I saw that she was working the shift directly before or after mine, I would make a mental note that I was working a double that day. I desperately needed the money, so I always did it, but I would have appreciated just being scheduled for those extra hours in advance, instead of always being asked the day of because someone else couldn't manage to get her shit together for the umpteenth time. One time, she came in to print out her pay stub while I was working, and she had the audacity to complain about how small her paycheck was. I wanted to tell her, "You were scheduled for 5 shifts during that pay period, and you called out for 3 of them. I know, because I'm the one who covered them. What the hell did you expect your paycheck was going to look like?" One of my shittier restaurant jobs, the manager would always ask me at the end of my shift. I worked open to 5. If I'd be able to stay late. I was always like, "Dude, I'm not working 16 hours. He would then get mad that I didn't want the extra hours. At a job I worked in my early 20s, they had a great system for this. You could volunteer to be on standby in case people called in sick. Just for being on standby and calling in at 8 a.m. to check if you were needed, you got $10, I think $20 on the weekends. And if you ended up having to cover someone else, you got hourly pay on top of your salary for the hours worked. Completely voluntary, and you were the one calling in. Of course, one of the reasons it worked was the sheer number of potential people who could cover you. I would have been pissed if I had been called at 6 a.m. and asked to cover shifts. This is a policy that is proactive, not reactive. Good management. I had a job like this about 7 years ago. It was bad. Daily calls to come in. Once I worked a 12-hour night shift, and the second I got home, still in my car, I got a call asking to come in and cover a day shift position. And a few times received calls while I was already at work asking me to come in. I quit that job when I got into an gnarly accident on my way in, and the secretary said, "You should still come in. You're so close anyways."